Good morning if you are joining us from Hong Kong, and for those of you joining from elsewhere, good day to you. My name is Professor Nabahar Sharif. I'm the acting head and professor in the Division of Public Policy at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all participants or online to this Policy Dialogue series, co-hosted by the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and the Education University. The Policy Dialogue Series 18 and is now in its 6th year. The theme of this year's series is Hong Kong into a new future, reflect, renew, and reinvigorate. This year's series is chaired by Professor Anthony Cheung and Professor Lui Tai Lok, and they are joined by other speakers in the relevant fields to explore critical policy challenges. Today's dialogue is the 5th one of this season, and the earlier ones were held on 28th of October, Hong Kong's economic challenges and opportunities. On the 18th of November, Hong Kong in the Greater Bay Area. 27th of January, earlier this year, Hong Kong in a polarized world. And last month, on the 2nd of March, public policy under changing order. Today, as I've just mentioned, is the 5th and final dialogue in the dialogue series, and it is entitled One Country, Two Systems 2.0. Hong Kong continuing to be special, how? So just to introduce today's dialogue, despite frequent reiteration by Chinese leaders that one country, two systems is to persist, cynicism and conspiracy theories abound. Optimists expect the new era Patriots Administration to restore stability and prosperity, yet cynics and sceptics wonder if the city still enjoys a high degree of autonomy and political freedom. Some even perceive the city as going downhill compared to the mainland. The central government clearly expects Hong Kong to continue to be special and different from mainland cities. Under the changing local and national, as well as the impact of worsening global geopolitics, the question is whether Hong Kong can maintain its distinctiveness and purposefulness. How? How can the once vibrant and self-confident metropolis of Hong Kong be reinvigorated? Now, I'm delighted to inform you that we have a star-studded lineup of speakers today. The first speaker will be Professor Anthony Cheung, who is a currently advisor at the Department of Social Science and Policy Studies at the Education University of Hong Kong, and also an adjunct professor in the Division of Policy at HKUST. Professor Cheung was formerly Secretary for Transport and Housing of the Hong Kong SAR government from July 2012 to June 2017, and he was also president of the which was then known as the Hong Kong Institute of Education from January 2008 to June 2012. We are also joined by four other distinct, Mr. Jasper Tsang, who was formerly the president of our Legislative Council from 2008 to 2016. Unfortunately, Mr. Jasper Tsang is currently in hospital, undergoing eye treatment. Join us either physically or in person. So what I will be doing in my role as moderator is covering his PowerPoint slides on his behalf. To reiterate, those slides are not mine. I will be covering them on behalf of Mr. Jasper Tsang. Our third speaker is Professor James Wang Jixian. He is the research director of the Bay Area Hong Kong Center, and he will be speaking third. Following James will be Dr. Brian Wong, who is an assistant professor in philosophy at Hong Kong U and a Rhodes Scholar and advisor on strategy of the Oxford Global Society. Dr. Brian Wong will also be joining us online, as will our fifth and final speaker, Professor Lui Tai Lok. Professor Lui is the adjunct research chair professor in the Department of Social Sciences and Policy Studies at the Education University of Hong Kong. And from April 2016 to June 21, he was vice president, research and development of the Education University of Hong Kong. So with that introduction put aside, I would like now to hand over the floor to our first speaker, Professor Anthony, followed by Mr. Yok-sing, which I will cover, followed by James, Brian, and Tai Lok. Over to you, Professor Anthony Cheung.
Thank you very much, Nabahar. Let me show my... Okay. I think it is very appropriate that we end this annual series, the sixth one, annual series, with the topic, One Country, Two Systems. Now, the topic is One Country, Two System 2.0. So the question really is whether we are at the stage of 2.0. But I would say that for any institutional arrangement, it is an evolving framework. So we have to look at one country, two systems as it is today and the challenges that we face. Now, 2 years ago, on the 1st of July 2022, President Xi Jinping made a speech at the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's reunification with the motherland. And he emphasized that one country, two systems is to continue because it is in the best interest of Hong Kong as well as the nation. However, there are skeptics, including international observers, that Hong Kong has changed a lot and that maybe we are going along the path of one country, one system. So I think at this juncture, it would be useful to review one country, two systems as an institutional arrangement. Now, looking back, we can say that we have gone quite a distance in this trajectory from reunification in 1997. I could still remember that at the time of reunification, the sentiments were largely about keeping Hong Kong as it is, so freezing what is. The legacy of Hong Kong as a very successful international hub, the market-based capitalist system, and I think that is the foundation of one country, two systems, the Hong Kong style of capitalism coexisting with the socialist system on the mainland for mutual benefit. So mindset about freezing what is, keeping what was thought to be very good for Hong Kong. So there has been an innate conservatism. I think that is part of the reason why more than two decades into reunification, we are still rather uneasy about this, the dynamics behind the two systems. Oftentimes, there had been identity anxieties. Now, originally, Hong Kong was to serve as two models, a growth model for the mainland for reforms, and also a model for reunification with Taiwan. Now, at this point, I mean, 20-odd years after reunification, perhaps the two models may no longer be that relevant because there has been very rapid development and growth, economic growth, of course, on the mainland. Remember, back in the early 1990s, the GDP of Hong Kong was almost 30% of the mainland's. Today, it's about 2%. So you can see that the gap is very different from then. And so the question really is Hong Kong still good? What is Hong Kong good at, except its international financial center, which is also being questioned by some. The challenges are, is Hong Kong still relevant in China's path of modernization? Because President Xi emphasized that we should go about modernization in a Chinese way. And the growth model on the mainland is quite different from that of Hong Kong. Because of what happened in the last few years, there has been, in my view, some kind of trend to praise mainland advancement, oftentimes at the expense of Hong Kong, to say that we are not good in Hong Kong, we are not good in this, we are not good in that. So is Hong Kong still important and relevant? Our links with developed economies in the West particularly have been weakened because of the changing global geopolitics. As to Taiwan, I would say very frankly that Hong Kong is no longer the model for the future reunification of Taiwan with the mainland. And in fact, relations between Hong Kong and Taiwan have essentially broken down. Hong Kong doesn't have any influence on Taiwan. So what is Hong Kong then under the next phase of one country, two systems? Before 1997, the mindset, as I said earlier, was to keep things unchanged. Now we have to change a lot of things because of the changing environment in the nation and also internationally. After 1997, until most recently, by and large, there was this understanding that as far as one country, two systems is concerned, we are two systems in politics, in administration, within the one country, but because of economic integration, perhaps in terms of economy, we are moving towards one system with features in Hong Kong still distinct from those on the mainland. However, there have been two systems tensions. But today, after 2020, after 2019, the political unrest, and in 2020, we have the new Patriots Administration, the imposition of national security law and all that. We have got new starting points. The challenge of this new journey from 2020 onwards is to how to balance between the safeguarding national security on the one hand and maintaining all those freedoms as guaranteed by the basic law, those freedoms that are important to Hong Kong as an international hub. The balancing of the central government's comprehensive jurisdiction over Hong Kong, as well as a high degree of autonomy for the SAR. And this point was also emphasized in President Xi Jinping's speech in 2022. So what is the new feature of one country, two systems? Are we in addition to sort of one system in economics, are we moving gradually towards one system in governance and politics? I suppose there are different views. However, there's a clear consensus, both on the part of the central government and also in Hong Kong, I suppose, to keep Hong Kong's special status as an SAR. Hong Kong needs to be special, needs to be distinct, and Hong Kong needs to be international. So this one country, two system 2.0 is still evolving within the national landscape. But one thing is very clear, there's no more 2047 deadline, so to speak. So we are going beyond 2047. But we need to earn Hong Kong's exceptionalism if we were exceptional in the past. So what do we mean by exceptional? We have to do that through merit, through performance, in economics, in other terms. Hong Kong has to thrive as a city distinct from other cities. Not that we don't like to collaborate, but Hong Kong needs to be distinct because we need to contribute towards national development. And in fact, such kind of distinctness, in my view, is the raison d'etat of Hong Kong, the whole purpose of the existence of Hong Kong. Hong Kong needs to demonstrate its economic prowess, especially the IFC and global connectivity. But at the moment, Hong Kong's economic advantage, Hong Kong's economic strength is in question because of various developments. The new normal, the international new normal, will impose new challenge to Hong Kong. We were used to the old normal, so to speak, where the world, by and large, was rather peaceful, particularly after the end of the Cold War. And then for a number of years, there was stability, there was good dialogue, even cooperation between the US and China. But now the world has changed. But this new normal probably will last for quite a while. So eventually, of course, there will be new rules of engagement. Now, under the new environment, the new geopolitics, will Hong Kong still have a role? In the past, Hong Kong used to be a kind of gray area, neutral geopolitical ground, offering space for various kinds of interactions. Is that space still there for Hong Kong? We need to reconceptualize the intermediate role of Hong Kong, an intermediary or a link, conduit between rivals instead of partners. Is that possible? So the whole challenge then under one country, two systems at a more macro level is about re-establishing Hong Kong as a nexus, a link with a renewed purpose and strategy. Now I'm trying to look at this future of Hong Kong, this one country, two systems in a very positive manner. Of course, there are rather pessimistic views around as well. So how can we reconstruct, narrate one country, two systems? So I'm offering some points for reflections here. I don't have the answers, but I think we need to start with questions. Balancing national security and the local Hong Kong identity. Now, identity has been an issue of Hong Kong, particularly the younger generation of the last couple of decades. Now, in fact, if you look around the world, in other cities, other jurisdictions, there have always been issues of identity to some extent. And ultimately, identity is about how to look at others. So we have to review what do we mean by the other in the context of Hong Kong versus the nation, versus other cities on the mainland within the country, other cities in the region, globally, and also the others within Hong Kong. So I think we need to have a balanced view about identity. The second point about balancing, as I said earlier, is balancing national security and freedoms, human rights. Hong Kong should remain a free city, a vibrant civil society, but at the same time, mindful of the need to safeguard national security, especially in the changing geopolitics. And in fact, if we look at other cities, I mean, issues of national security have also emerged as an important concern. Now, on the part of the national future, China, I think we need to recognize that our country has moved from the Deng Xiaoping era reform and opening up to what is now known as the Xi Jinping era of the Chinese way of modernization. And what do we mean by that? What is the national discourse on development? Would that have any implications for Hong Kong? So we cannot just stay in the past, because nationally the paradigm somehow has moved it, has shifted. So is Hong Kong still offering solutions? Hong Kong used to offer solutions, but now increasingly Hong Kong may be seen as a problem instead of a solution. So are we still able to offer good, relevant solutions? We have to reconceptualize Hong Kong's role in changing geopolitics, characterized by US or Western China rivalries and hostilities. Now, in the past, Hong Kong was a kind of neutral geopolitical space. Can Hong Kong still offer what I would describe as third-party space, that things can be done in Hong Kong which could not be done elsewhere? But gradually, it seems that Singapore is trying to be that third-party space within the vicious geopolitics. Now, can Hong Kong still keep our role as a third-party space? We have to re-narrate what is meant by Hong Kong being international and Hong Kong being special. Can Hong Kong do things that other mainland cities cannot do or cannot do as well? I could still remember that a few years ago, the late Premier Li Keqiang, and I think it was around 2016, and he said to Hong Kong has to meet those national needs with ways, with means that Hong Kong is good at. 國家所需，香港所長. So we need to reflect constantly whether we are filling the gap and what the gaps are. And in this changing world, can Hong Kong, as Hong Kong China, which is a status conferred by the Basic Law, can we engage the world in ways that would be different or complementary to work done by other cities on the mainland, by other outward-looking cities like Shanghai or Shenzhen for that matter? So to conclude, we do face a kind of existential challenge. And to me, the question is not whether, but how to face the challenge. The challenge is there. And one country, two systems, ultimately it's not just about Hong Kong, but also for China, for the nation as well. But for Hong Kong, we have to learn to govern a more divisive society, particularly in the aftermath of the 2019 unrest. So there are various cleavages and differences that we have to manage well. We have to reassure an anxious and perhaps distrusting society. And I would suggest we need to focus on the 5 R's: recognition of differences, of contradictions, of issues, reconciliation, especially after 2019, with our young people, reconnection with them, with different stakeholders. We need to have a new consensus, rebuilding, and representation. I think these 5 R's are important. We have two main political challenges for Hong Kong as an SAR. We need to gain the trust of the central government, because only with central trust could we have sufficient space for further development. We have to gain the trust by way of loyalty and by way of functionality. What functions can Hong Kong serve? We have to gain international confidence as well, because Hong Kong is an outward-looking city. Hong Kong will not be Hong Kong if we are an enclosed economy or society. So we need to remain open, pluralist, inclusive, a free market, rule of law. And rule of law is oftentimes emphasized by the central government. We have to rebuild self-confidence and pride. Over the last few years, unfortunately, some have lost trust, self-confidence in ourselves. So we need to have to rebuild self-confidence, but that cannot be done simply by wishful thinking. We need to look deeper into ourselves, how good we are, how special we are, our core values, our core strength. And finally, I think we need to continue the good tradition of Hong Kong as a society, as an economy that dares to think and act. We should not wait for advice, sort of orders, instructions for others. We have this can-do spirit in Hong Kong for several decades. 敢為天下先. We need to dare to be the first. And this is also a phrase used by Xi Jinping, President Xi Jinping in his speech. So we need to look into ourselves, and we need to identify gaps. We need to move forward. And I think if Hong Kong can have a more outward-looking perspective, then one country, two systems will have another future in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Anthony Cheung, for those and insights. A lot of issues, a host of issues raised that we can discuss later on during the discussion period. Now, we've had a really exciting build-up to today's policy dialogue because speakers have been facing some challenges, not least of which is our second speaker today, originally Mr. Tsang Yok-sing, who was supposed to be here in person but had an eye issue and is currently hospitalized, so we wish him a speedy recovery for that. However, in preparation for our dialogue today, Mr. Tsang Yok-sing did prepare a PowerPoint, and I have the unenviable task in my role as moderator to go through this PowerPoint. Of course, I will do my best to do justice to this PowerPoint because Mr. Tsang, as many of you know, is a strong pillar of Hong Kong political and Hong Kong politics and the political landscape in Hong Kong for the last few decades. And I'm a mere university professor, but I will do my best to cover the contents, and these are views, as I've mentioned, that are of Mr. Tsang Yok-sing's. So, to start with, assuming it is one country, two systems 2.0, the question that is raised is why does it continue to be one country, two systems? What brought about the change from version 1.0 of one country, two systems to version 2.0 of one country, two systems? And one way of answering this question is a number of quotes that Mr. Tsang Yok-sing presents to us from the last 27 years from Chinese leaders. Let's start with the speech that our President Jiang Zemin gave at the establishment of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region in 1997 on the 1st of July. As a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, Hong Kong will exercise a high degree of autonomy and enjoy executive, legislative, and independent judicial power. including that of final adjudication in accordance with the provisions of the Basic Law. No central department or local government in other parts of China may or will be allowed to interfere in the affairs which, under the Basic Law, should be administered by the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region on its own. So that was in 1997, on the 1st of July, by President Jiang Zemin. And then we have another quote from 2007, 10 years later, by Hu Jintao on the 10th anniversary of the establishment of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. And President Hu Jintao at that time said, "One country, two systems cannot be separated from each other. One country means that we must uphold the power vested with the central government and safeguard the nation's sovereignty, unity, and security. Two systems means that we should ensure a high degree of autonomy of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and support the Chief Executive and the SAR government in exercising the power to govern in accordance with the law." And then I'll continue to move on with some other quotes. And once again, the idea of showing these quotes over the last 20-odd years is to try and answer that question: how are we moving from version 1.0 of One Country, Two Systems to version 2.0? On 2012, on the 15th anniversary of the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, President Hu Jintao gave another speech. "The fundamental goal of the principles, policies, and major steps of the central government for Hong Kong is to safeguard state sovereignty, security, and development interests, and to ensure long-term prosperity and stability in Hong Kong. This is the core requirement and basic objective of practicing One Country, Two Systems in Hong Kong." We move to the 1st of July 2017, and President Xi Jinping offered a speech at the 20th anniversary of the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR. "Currently, some new developments have occurred, and new issues have emerged regarding the application of One Country, Two Systems in Hong Kong. Hong Kong needs to improve its systems to uphold national sovereignty, security, and development interests. It needs to enhance education, raise public awareness of the history and culture of the Chinese nation. It is yet to build public consensus on some major political and legal issues. The Hong Kong economy also faces quite a few challenges. Hong Kong's traditional strengths start to lose the edge, while new drivers of growth are yet to emerge. Housing and other issues that affect the daily life of the people have become more serious." So just to remind everyone, this is 2017. This is after the Occupy Central movement, before the social unrest of 2019. So we can see some changes. We continue. Also at the speech of 2017, President Xi Jinping offered these remarks: "In conducting day-to-day affairs, we must be guided by a strong sense of one country, firmly observe the principle of one country, and thus correctly handle the relationship between the Hong Kong SAR and the central government. Any attempt to endanger China's sovereignty and security, challenge the power of the central government and the authority of the Basic Law of the HKSAR, or use Hong Kong to carry out infiltration and sabotage activities against the mainland is an act that crosses the red line and is absolutely impermissible." So we can see these comments from 2017 have had some sort of an impact, and we can read into the impact as we wish, but these comments were precursors to some of the changes that we have recently seen. And then we move to 2022, quite recent. Xi Jinping, in a report of the 20th National Congress of the CPC, offered these comments: "In the face of turbulent developments in Hong Kong, we, the Central Committee of the CPC, effectively exercised our overall jurisdiction over the SAR as prescribed by the Constitution and the Basic Law, formulated and put into effect the law of the Hong Kong SAR, and ensured that the principle of Patriots Administering Hong Kong is implemented. Thanks to these moves, order has been restored in Hong Kong, marking a major turn for the better in the region." So, going back to that question, assuming it is now One Country, Two Systems version 2.0, what are the defining characteristics that distinguish this new version 2.0 from the old version 1.0? And some defining characteristics are based on relationships between the following stakeholders and following parties. Relations between the central government and the Hong Kong SAR government. How have those relations changed? The relations between the people of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and the people of the People's Republic of China. The relations between the people and the government within the Hong Kong SAR. The relations between the Hong Kong SAR government and the various political groups in Hong Kong, how have those changed from the earlier one country, two systems to the later one country, two systems? How about the relations between the executive branch and the legislative branch of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region? Continuing from that, the executive and the judiciary of the Hong Kong SAR. The relations between the various interest groups and the Hong Kong SAR government, how have those changed? And relations between the Hong Kong SAR and various foreign governments. These are all dimensions along which we can try and understand what was on the previous slide, the defining characteristics that distinguish the One Country, Two Systems version 2.0 from the One Country, Two Systems version 1.0. So, based on these dimensions and these sets of relationships, the question then is, how can Hong Kong continue to be special? Going back to version 1.0 is not an option. We have moved forward. It is natural and clear that we have to grow, we have to evolve, and we have seen many challenges, overcome many obstacles in the last 27 years. Reverting to version 1.0 is not an option. So the question about Hong Kong, how Hong Kong can continue to be special, remains. Additionally, we have to ask, how special? Is it just a little bit special from the rest of the other cities in mainland China, or significantly special as compared to the other cities in mainland China? What were the essential features that made Hong Kong special in the past, and how can those essential features be continued so as to continue to make Hong Kong special in the future? And our previous speaker, Professor Anthony Cheung, touched on many of those essential features and dwelled on them. So which of those features are actually doable, are sustainable? Some of those features that made Hong Kong special in the version 1.0 of One Country, Two Systems are not sustainable. Fine. We have to understand that, we have to acknowledge that, but we have to identify new features that can make Hong Kong continue to be special and are also sustainable in the current framework, in the current environment that we are presently occupying. Are there opportunities for developing such new features that will make Hong Kong special? Once again, our previous speaker, Professor Anthony Cheung, mentioned some of those, and I think there are ample opportunities for developing new features that can and will make Hong Kong special. The challenge is for us to take up the initiative and be proactive enough to grasp those new features that can make Hong Kong continue to be special in the future. So in that line, there are a few more slides of quotes, and then we will conclude. In October 2017, President Xi Jinping, in his report at the 19th National Congress of the CPC, said the following: "We will continue to support the governments and the chief executives of both regions in pursuing the following endeavors: exercising law-based governance, uniting and leading the people of all sectors in an active and concerted effort to promote development and harmony, ensuring and improving people's well-being, taking well-ordered steps to advance democracy, maintaining law and order, and fulfilling the constitutional responsibility of safeguarding China's sovereignty, security, and development interests." So already in this quote, we can see that there are definitely opportunities for developing new features that can continue to make Hong Kong special with the backing of the mainland Chinese government. In 2017, President Xi Jinping, in his report at the 19th National Congress of the CPC, said, "We will remain committed to the policy for the Hong Kong people to govern Hong Kong and for Macau people to govern Macau, with patriots playing a principal and key role. We will develop and strengthen the ranks of patriots who love both our country and the regions and foster greater patriotism and a stronger sense of national identity among the people in Hong Kong and Macau. With this, our compatriots in Hong Kong and Macau will share both the historic responsibility of national rejuvenation and the pride of a strong and prosperous China." So this quote sort of gives more insight into the changing landscape as compared to 1997 and raises the question of how Hong Kong can fit in with the national rejuvenation and the pride of a strong and prosperous China. In his most recent speech at the 25th anniversary of the establishment of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region on the 1st of July 2022, President Xi Jinping said, "We must maintain Hong Kong's unique status and strengths," echoing what Professor Anthony Cheung said earlier. Enjoying the backing of the motherland while staying connected with the world is a notable strength of Hong Kong, a strength cherished by both Hong Kong residents and central authorities. The central government fully supports Hong Kong in maintaining its unique status and strengths on a long-term basis, in consolidating its role as an international financial, shipping, and trading center, in maintaining its free, open, and sound business environment, in retaining its common law system, and in expanding smooth and convenient links with the rest of the world. So already we can see that the earlier question posed, what are the new opportunities? Are there new opportunities? Are there sustainable opportunities that can continue to make Hong Kong special? Are abundant in this short quote presented on this slide. And also in his speech, he mentioned that the central authorities trust in the historical course of building a modern socialist country in all respects and achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Hong Kong will have an even greater contribution to make. So this represents, from the highest perspective, not a diminishing of Hong Kong's role, but rather a raising of Hong Kong's status and a sort of a challenge to Hong Kong, that Hong Kong will have an even greater contribution to make. Can Hong Kong rise to that challenge to indeed fulfill its promise to make that greater contribution to the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation? So, to conclude, how can Hong Kong continue to be special? Mr. Jasper Tsang Yok-sing concludes by saying the following: the question cannot be answered without a clear understanding of China's plans of development for the coming decades. And for this reason, these quotes over the last 25 years have been presented to try and help us understand the plans for development for China, the direction in which China is pursuing, and Hong Kong can fit into those plans for the coming decades, and thereby maintain its special status. So that is the end of Mr. Tsang Yok-sing's presentation. I will now revert to my role as a moderator and hand the floor over to Dr. James Wang, who will be talking about understanding comparative institutional environment through the evolution of twin megacities of Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Dr. James Wang, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the first presenters and all the things presented on the first two PPT shows a lot of things that not only cover as my background for this short presentation, but also I think cover a lot of political or ideologically correct or somehow related to the points from the very top leader of China, which trying to iterate that Hong Kong is unique and that we should keep that unique from the central government. And this is also very important for me to introduce something very concrete, very geographical, that is how, if this is a policy, if this is the policy that we need to see how Hong Kong actually in this particular region in relation with nearby city, which is also a special economic zone once Shenzhen, because we are similar in a way, but we are very different two cities. But the growth of Shenzhen is very much related to the role of Hong Kong. I bring up this issue is that a couple of months ago, I met a top leader of China Bank Shenzhen, and he brought up a topic, we chat about one thing, which is in English we normally say integration, but actually in Chinese 一體化, 一體化, which is a much stronger term rather than integration. But most of Hong Kong people are very sensitive to this term 一體化. That means, homogeneously, Hong Kong is going to be Shenzhen or something the other way around. The funny thing is that this person told me he came to Shenzhen 30 years ago and he wished that Shenzhen eventually become Hong Kong. But 一体化 or 一体化 or integration to most of Hong Kong people are the other way around. Some people worry about Hong Kong eventually become just another normal Chinese city. So this is why I just although I'm a geographer, but I trying to look into history rather than geography to see how the two cities evolve and co-evolve together. And then I find that term very helpful, that is a comparative environment. I try to say, look, this kind of environment we have in Hong Kong as well as Shenzhen has there, both given or regulated or designed by the top government, national government, either British government or Chinese government at different time. But eventually, we try to distinguish our place from surrounding area. Even Shenzhen did that kind of a setting very well. But thing is, why and how actually in the last 40 years, we changed, both of us changed gradually. And if we look into so-called evolutionary approach, we'll find that Hong Kong appeared as a city 180 years ago, but then Shenzhen just 40 years ago. But we see different possible changes that sometimes as a sudden change, for example, Hong Kong came into being, and some kind of a expectation that Hong Kong keep moving towards one direction, economically speaking, and it's a kind of industrialization at the very beginning, right after the PRC established in 1949. And then Shenzhen came into being right after the opening policy, 1978. And then these two sudden changes bring up something which we call transplantation. That means some of the industries moved northwards to China, and Hong Kong ended up with almost zero in manufacturing sector. But Hong Kong moved up, and then we see another expectation. That means Hong Kong is gradually upgrading itself into a financial center, into going back to something that we keep doing. We call replication. That means we doing trade all the way from the day one until now without any stop, but upgrading ourselves to a financial center internationally or regionally. At the same time, Shenzhen is also upgrading their economy. So the two systems in two cities very much differently working, but working together. Why I say that so? I try to compare Hong Kong with Shenzhen from their economic structure, and I found very interesting story. I will show you the next picture. This one is telling us, on the left hand, we have 5 bars showing how Hong Kong gradually changed from more balanced kind of a economy towards bias to service sector, tertiary sector, with very little, 1% in manufacturing. The other way, if we look Shenzhen, the other 2 bars show that Shenzhen still have extremely strong manufacturing sector, millions of people working in the manufacturing, and its manufacturing is up to almost 40% of their GDP. But if we put them together, and then we realize that Hong Kong on the very edge, the last bar, which is Hong Kong plus Shenzhen versus Singapore. If we look at the structure, they are very similar. When I put Hong Kong and Shenzhen together, this is before 2.0, one country, two systems. This is 2014. So this data show that Hong Kong, although if we look individually, Hong Kong is very biased to certain structure, but if we put Hong Kong, Shenzhen together, it looks like we work like a Singapore, which working very hard to make a balance in terms of the economic structure. But we, on the other hand, on Hong Kong side, our government was very much like a laissez-faire system. We interfere very minimal. But on the other hand, Shenzhen has been strongly influenced like the China style, that with a strong government, with a visible hand, but at the same time, it's also very market-oriented if we compare Shenzhen with other inland cities in China. So in that sense, I would argue, if we look at Hong Kong plus Shenzhen, this is a quite ideal sort of a structure, and this is performed under one country, two systems. This is the result of a one country, two systems. One on the other side is more, also we put together in a way that Hong Kong play as international connectivity, plus we do the financial part, a financial center for Shenzhen and for entire China. On the other hand, the other one is a manufacturing base, and now turned into a more innovative development center, something like that. So we cooperate, we, how to say this, we support each other in that way. But it does not bother this one country, two systems, or the other way to say, it's actually supported by one country, two system. Otherwise, you cannot see two cities next to each other, but have a very different role to play economically. So this is a very unique situation in the world. No other place in the world have two mega cities next to each other like this. This is the only one. So if we're looking forward, like Professor Cheung said at the very beginning, we have problems for finding the future, which direction we're talking about. We're talking about more integrated, yes, we cannot avoid that, but does that integration means homogenization? Or we try very much and very hard to maintain differentiation. According to the quote Mr. Tsang just mentioned from President Xi Jinping, differentiation still needed, uniqueness still needed for Hong Kong. However, the perceptions of Shenzhen's role by national government also important. And the perceptions, we just mentioned Hong Kong's role at the national level, particularly after 1997, and particularly in this 2.0 stage, we saw that. But is that case that every Chinese, mainland Chinese, see the same thing? Or because when I look into some of the short videos or whatever available online, not every Chinese on those presentations show that Hong Kong need to keep that uniqueness, okay? In a sense, some people think that Hong Kong should sooner or later become one of the, just like other cities in China. But how can we convince all people, including ourselves, that Hong Kong's uniqueness is the most important thing for Hong Kong, and the most importantly for China? The last one is more important, particularly as you mentioned, and the two presenters also mentioned that the changes in the external, international environment, we cannot control that. We cannot even influence probably the perception of Hong Kong role at the national level. What we can do, the choice of our, enterprises or market or our people. Some people choose to leave Hong Kong, fine. But the thing is, those we are here, how we can choose. In this sense, I would argue that we see that the two governments, Shenzhen and Hong Kong, both choose to do something to make the two cities more integrated. One is the typical situation at Shanghai, which is the zone that Shenzhen did 10 years ago. They enlarged that from 15 square kilometers to 120 square kilometers in order to make sure that the Hong Kong firms do go there to invest and to cooperate, etc. At the same time, it was the first time for Hong Kong for 180 years to have its northern part of the territory to be developed and to be focused to connect the mainland proactively. This is the first time, a substantial change. If we look from this perspective, Hong Kong government has done a lot. However, how can make sure this will work? This is not that straightforward. If you ask Hong Kong people, how many of you want to go to this area of Hong Kong to work? I have a big question mark. But on the other hand, will change our, the government will offer some kind of a policy to allow people commuting from Shenzhen to Hong Kong, to this part of Hong Kong to work. Will that work for this and for Hong Kong and for China as all? So by the last page would show that, to me, embeddedness is kind of a way of integration. That means that you don't have to change a lot of your regulations, your laws, your legislative kind of thing to keep yourself still one country, two system. But at the same time, how can we adopt policies and regulations to increase more balanced flow of goods, in particular the exchange of people and the information? How can we encourage people to come to Hong Kong to work at the same time, which bring kind of a win-win to both Shenzhen and Hong Kong, at the same time keep Hong Kong unique, and even strengthening Hong Kong being unique. I think this is not that straightforward, not that easy. But at the same time, from Shenzhen's perspective, they do hope that they can have more from Hong Kong without any doubt. So we have this kind of a this kind of a dilemma. At the same time, we want to be more and still independent, unique. At the same time, we want to be more integrated to guard new opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. James Wang, for that really insightful and clear presentation. Our next two speakers are online. They do not have PowerPoints, so you'll be able to just listen to them online. The first of our two online speakers is Dr. Brian Wong from Hong Kong U, and I have already introduced him, so I will swiftly hand the floor over to Brian to allow him to present his remarks on this topic. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you very, very much. And just checking to see if I'm in fact audible. Okay, lovely, fantastic. Well, thank you once again, Anthony, Tylock, and Abaha for having me over. And it's a privilege to be among such august and esteemed fellow panelists. I want to divide up my presentation today into three key components. The first is on Hong Kong's importance as a special and unique city, and then clarifying what exactly that means. The second would lay out what I see to be the four major obstacles and challenges to accomplishing this particular objective. And the third offers some of my thoughts and recommendations on where and how I think Hong Kong could proceed from here. But the overarching thesis of my presentation is very simple. China does not need another mainland city. It does not need another Shanghai from Hong Kong. It does not need Hong Kong to become completely assimilated and wholly homogenous, as James highlighted just then, and incorporated into China as little more than just a replication or replica of Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Shanghai. That is not Beijing's intention, nor is it what Beijing needs. And therefore, it falls upon us here in Hong Kong to maintain and keep Hong Kong's uniqueness and special standing, not just within China, but also in relation to the world at large. Because a Hong Kong that loses and has no credibility in the eyes of the international community is no different from a Hong Kong that basically acquiesces to and that cedes totally its prerogative and agency over steering its own economic, domestic, municipal, institutional, and educational and beyond affairs, which are all prerogatives granted to us by the basic law in accordance with the one country, two systems framework. So that is therefore my main submission and thesis today. I want to begin by asking the question, Hong Kong is often said to be special, we need to be special, so on and so forth, but what does it mean for Hong Kong to actually be special? Special for whom? Special in what sense? And with what effects in mind? In my opinion, there are broadly four key features or four key levels on which such specialness must play out. The first is special to Hong Kongers. The second is that it must be special in relation to the rest of China. The third is that it is special within Asia. And the fourth is that it must be special to the world at large. And I'm going to go through them very briefly in turn without necessarily unpacking them in excess detail. So starting first with Hong Kongers, because we often omit this question, right, from our discourse on Hong Kong. We tend to say, well, you've got to think about how Hong Kong plays a role in 国家发展大局. Alternatively, how Hong Kong must comply with all these directives and all these proposals and visions, which are important, no doubt. And yet, fundamentally, when I speak with the ordinary Hong Konger on the streets, when I talk with the ordinary shopkeeper or the student or just friends of mine from middle-class families, who would ask me, well, all of that is fair and square and grand, but where's the us in the story? Where's the Hong Kong in a Hong Kong story? And if we want to tell an accurate Hong Kong story, we've got to first start by asking ourselves, what makes our culture worth celebrating? And it is the pluralism. It's a heterogeneity. It's a fact that both Anita Mui and also Leslie Cheung are in many ways emblematic of an era where East truly met West, and that they were able to infuse elements from Japanese, from British, from Chinese, and of course from Hong Kong, local Hong Kong and Cantonese cultures into their own repertoire and music. And that is why, if Hong Kong is to be special, we need to look at all the unique linguistic symbols, the cultural artifacts, the historical legacies, and also the fabric, the social fabric that makes us what we are, so fluid, so dynamic, and celebrate it. Take it in stride. Have more discourses centered around thinking about how we are a unique element within the GBA, but also in relation to Southern Chinese culture and the entirety of China at large. And until the day we can convince the mass majority of Hong Kongers that Hong Kong in the 2020s or in the 21st century still has a role to play, until that day comes, I fear that the talk of making Hong Kong, rejuvenated and alive again, realizing and actually coming to fruition simply because we've omitted a very key constituent of the demographics we ought to cater to. The second sense of special is in relation to mainland China. And this is where I want to once again pick up on Professor Wang's comments just then in highlighting that I fundamentally think Hong Kong needs to engage in complementary differentiation as opposed to combative or antagonistic differentiation, right? Historically, we'd often prided ourselves and held ourselves to be purportedly superior to the mainland by positioning ourselves as leading in a rule of law, in institutional transparency and accountability, no corruption, so on and so forth. I mean, that historically been the narratives that supported a sense of self-superiority that had been adopted amongst Hong Kongers. And yet, as the past 2 decades have shown, there are many benefit and merit and virtue in a way the mainland China does things, and also many defects and limits in the way we go about our own business here in Hong Kong. So what's therefore needed here is less of this sense of supercilious and almost, patronizing and self-absorbed sense of superiority, but more of an acknowledgement that there are virtues in both the mainland and Hong Kong system. But what we ultimately need to do is to ask, how can we foster complementarity through differentiation? I recall Chen Duanhong 教授 recently mentioning, actually, in a series of interviews that he conducted, that the differences between Hong Kong and mainland must be organic. It must be a form of organic tension, 有机的张力, that emerges from the juxtaposition that enables the mainland to, firstly, open up continually to the world. Secondly, ramp up its credibility in the eyes of external investors and those whom it trades with. And thirdly, in undertaking domestic experimentation and reforms via the conduit of Hong Kong. I'll say more about the measures and also substantive implications of this in due course. But that to me is a second level of specialness, and also why it's so important to keep the institutions we have intact whilst also innovating concurrently. The final 2 levels to this, or the subsequent 2 levels, are what I would say are often omitted from discussions on Hong Kong. Historically, at one point after the handover, we dubbed ourselves Asia's World City. That was the branding effort. And then, around 10 years after the handover, around 2007, 8, it became China's leading international city. So that proceeded as the key brand for another sort of 7 years or so, until we got to a point where we said, actually, we're going to be the Greater Bay Area's shining crown jewel. And now we're standing in year 2024. So from Asia's world city and the talk of Nylon Kong through to China's top foremost city, through to the Greater Bay Area's leading city, I mean, it's clear that Hong Kong's been repositioning and reimagining itself in accordance with the times, and also shifting competitiveness and the trends from up north. And that's more than understandable. And yet at the end of the day, where is Hong Kong now in Asia? What is our value add for countries other than our own, that is China? What's our value add for Southeast Asia? What's our value add for Northeast Asia or Central Asia or South Asia? Now that to me is where we're not, focusing on sufficiently our deficiency. And I fear we've become increasingly complacent by framing ourselves as purely the conduit and bridge to China. The truth is, China has many bridges with the world. Shanghai is a bridge, Guangzhou is a bridge, Shenzhen is a bridge, even Beijing in a political sense is a bridge. So beyond serving as merely a bridge for China, we've got to add value. We've got to offer something distinctive for the rest of the continent. And my proposal here concerns knowledge value adding. And that is that Hong Kong should strive to serve as a knowledge hub, not just in relation to the tertiary institutions and higher education sector, of which we're all a part here on a panel, but also it's about fostering innovation, incubation, and cutting-edge technology in the earlier stages or the upstream stages of the supply chain, and harmonizing that with Shenzhen and Dongguan, which respectively have a lead and a clear comparative advantage in a midstream and a downstream segments of supply chains of advanced manufacturing. It is about finding that niche that we can harness and say to the rest of Asia that this is a place that you should come to if you want to receive bona fide, top quality education, executive training, business executive training, management training, and beyond. And I see no reason why Hong Kong shouldn't position itself to be the Oxbridge, to the UK, as we are to China. And that's to say that beyond serving as the international financial center and also conduit for China, we must also take up the mantle of being the education center for China, given our openness, our relative freedom of debate and information, and also the ease of access and entry and exit into and out of Hong Kong. And then finally, just very quickly, in the interest of time, I would say Hong Kong must preserve its uniqueness for the world at large. And here I would like to draw upon a parallel analogy, a metaphor that a friend of mine recently conveyed to me, which I found very interesting. And he says, Hong Kong must, act like a tightrope dancer, treading on a very fine tightrope. And that's to say that we must balance between two pairs or two dyads here, so to speak. The first is the north and the south, and the second is the left and the right. Now, on the north and the south, a narrow way of reading this is to say Hong Kong must balance between the mainland, which is our north, and the south, which is the rest of the world in terms of, how we engage the world at large. But a broader and more conceptual definition would say we need a balance between a global north, including many of the long-standing partners Anthony has highlighted and flagged to be important and instrumental to our business and trade and corporate interests, and we must not lose our connections with, but also the global south, which we had hitherto largely neglected. It's great that our government is now reaching out to the Gulf and also ASEAN, and I've spent many a month actually traveling through ASEAN, speaking to different partners, interlocutors, and also think tanks, and trying to understand what Hong Kong can do for them. But what about Central Asia? What about the Indian subcontinent with the largest number of people in a single country in India, which is now the most populous country in the world? What about Latin America? Or indeed vast swaths of Eastern Europe, and Northern and Sub-Saharan Africa as respectively different regions, so to speak. What we're fundamentally neglecting here is how we can value add for them and also draw them in. And finally, on a note of balancing between left and right, and I've been told that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to incorporate my worries and also my flagging of concerns into this final point. In balancing between left and right, it is imperative on one hand that we do not stray too far to the right, and that is to say we lose sight of the importance of national sovereignty and our woman, 国家的主权 in Hong Kong. It is imperative that Hong Kong remains an integral part of China and cannot serve as a base for insurgency and subordination. That much is clear, and therefore the enshrining of baselines is more than understandable. And yet, on the other hand, I have a personal worry that if we look at many in Hong Kong today, there's a tendency to look over their shoulders and to try to be more Catholic than the Pope, more royalist than the King, and to be more loyal to Beijing than Beijing really wants them to be. And the problem here isn't so much loyalty. It's that the means by which loyalty is signaled, is performed, is cashed out, comes from the most sycophantic and obsequious rhetoric, undermines Hong Kong's ability to speak to the world in a different voice from China. And that, to me, is the greatest concern I have. Our elite are not waking up to the fact if we do not position ourselves and can draw up and play up our strengths and uniqueness from the mainland, the world will see us as the same as the mainland. And that brings no benefits whatsoever to the mainland, to the country, and also to Hong Kong, of course, in particular. So on that note, I'll conclude my presentation. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brian, for adhering to the time, for that insightful presentation, and for the lots of fruit for thought that you offered us. I would now like to swiftly hand over to our fifth, but not our last but not least speaker, Professor Loy Tai Lok, who's an adjunct research chair professor at the Department of Social Sciences and Policy Studies at the Education University of Hong Kong. Professor Loy will also be joining us via Zoom, and he too doesn't have a presentation, so we can focus on his conveyance of his remarks. Without further ado, the floor is yours, Professor Loy.
It's good to be the last speakers because I know how much ground you guys have already covered. And basically, you have already covered all the main points. So I'm kind of more responsive to some of the key points that already raised. I would like to start with the issue or the leading question posed by Anthony. He mentioned that, one country, two system is supposed to be an evolving process. And in the context, then how Hong Kong would be able to earn its specialness, its special status. I think this is a very important point because if we try to put it in the context of different discourses on one country, two system, we have to recognize that on one side, we actually do have a view that doesn't think one country, two system is an evolving process. Some people will see it as a pact, as a contract, as something written down already in the basic law. And so what you need to do is to stick to it word by word and to just keep Hong Kong as if it's still, well, mid-1980s. Of course, they are not saying that, Hong Kong doesn't need development, but the point is that, that's the framework. That's how you look at it. So it's not really about how you think about how to further evolve and co-evolve. In fact, you just make reference to what has been said and done in the past. I myself would share Anthony's view that it is important to recognize that it's evolving, and in this regard, that it is important to think about how to earn Hong Kong's special status. And to earn a special status, of course, our reference point is our country's needs and aspirations. In what way Hong Kong would continue to contribute to that? That would raise one very interesting question, is because when we think about the country's needs and aspiration, then one way to look at it would be, of course, to align with the major national goal and major policies. And so what you need to do is to follow. That's one view. Of course, that would be important, but I would argue that, probably you need to do more in order to be special. On top of just alignment, of course, you need to think about Hong Kong's role as to think ahead, to be able to do something, probably in the present context for the mainland. It may not be that flexible or may not be that able to raise or to do it, but Hong Kong would dare to take the risk to think at least one step or two steps ahead, and so that we would have a leading role to play. And even if we are not going to lead, but at least to inspire how the country as a whole would take up this sort of new ideas and fresh perspective, so that the country as a whole would benefit. I think this thing ahead would be important for Hong Kong. And this is, I think, the major challenge ahead of us, because I think Anthony, Tsang Yok-sing as well, mentioned the word to dare. Hong Kong, in order to be special, we do need to have administrators that would able to dare to be ahead of time. Otherwise, what you do is no more than just to align and to follow. And you won't be given special status because you're a good follower, because you don't need to be special. So in order to be special, we need to think about what are the sort of things that we believe that probably 3 years, 4 years down the road, that would be what the country needs. That's exactly, I think, what Yok-sing has raised as very important is what are the new features? What are those not only new but sustainable features that would make Hong Kong special? These are the agenda that I think we need to have more serious thinking about it. And in this context, I think Brian, again, brought up some very, very important points. And I like his words of complementary differentiation, organic tensions. I think all of them are very good words to capture the special things that Hong Kong need to think about. Because it's very easy for us to think about complementary, but not differentiation. But just being complementary without differentiation, so what's the use of Hong Kong? You've got to be different in order to become complementary as well. But why that complementary aspect would particularly be important? Because you're very different. And the different meaning that, you know, it got to involve some kind of tension, because if every city in the mainland would think that, you know, these are the sort of things that the country needs and everyone is capable of doing it and are willing to do it, then there would not be any differentiation because everyone would be doing the same thing. That's exactly what Hong Kong needs to think about, you know, how to differentiate ourselves from other cities in the mainland, but at the same time, to allow ourselves to have tensions. Again, this goes back to the point about alignment. You know, if you want to avoid tension, if you want to avoid about controversy, you would only be a follower. And in this regard, I think Hong Kong really needs to dare to think. So as a result of that, I would think that, you know, we don't need empty words of saying that, you know, Hong Kong is the cultural center of East meets West. We really need to think about how Hong Kong is able to house and to create artistic exhibitions, curating museum, big shows that will allow controversial issues to arise. We are not supposed to be the most politically correct city in the entire mainland. We're not supposed to do that kind of role. But at the same time, we are not trying to challenge any agenda of the nation. Just allow us to do a little bit different, to be able to think ahead, to be able to allow us to accommodate tensions and so on. And this is exactly the reason why I do believe that Brian mentions about specialness. He already discussed different dimensions of it and levels of it. And I think James raised a very important questions about how Hong Kong will look at integration in a fresh perspective, instead of trying to avoid that kind of possibility. In fact, we have to admit that, you know, Hong Kong is a market society, so market forces would drive certain things. But what exactly do we mean by integration, and what exactly, you know, the role of Hong Kong in an growing integral system? And at the same time, go back to the words made by Brian again, to be complementary, differentiated. I'll put a stop here, and I'm sure that, you know, there will be a lot of issues to share among ourselves. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we do have a good 45 minutes for discussion. I am moderating the discussion, but I'm happy to let it run organically among our speakers, among the audience members, among those who are joining via Zoom. Maybe I can just kick things off with a short question, and then I'll allow the speakers to pose their own questions. We always think about Hong Kong and we say one country, two systems. Hong Kong is a special administrative region. But James's presentation highlighted to me that, you know, just north is another special place, special economic zone. So as a special administrative region versus a special economic zone, I was curious as to whether Shenzhen has similar debates about how special its economic zone is. In which way should its economy be special from the rest of the mainland Chinese economy? And to what degree should it be special economically? Because those are the same issues that we're grappling with for SAR, but how about SEZ? So I'd just like to open it up and have this discussion on Hong Kong's relationship with Shenzhen broadly. One is a special economic zone, another is a special administrative region. Both cities in Guangdong province, the border is next to us, is touching each other, and two mega cities. So I'd just like to start with James, and then I invite all the other speakers to chime in as they please about this relationship between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, broadly speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. I think trying to answer your questions, I have 2 points. One point is that from economic perspective, that why Shenzhen is Shenzhen, Hong Kong is Hong Kong, I want to say that these two cities actually work together as one interface of protocol. Hong Kong is more connecting in the world in a way that the system is very similar to the rest of the so-called Western society or market economy. On the other hand, the Shenzhen, even the economic zone, special economic zone, is somehow more China, more Chinese in a way that administratively or in terms of different layers of administration, political or whatever, is more similar to mainland China, but somehow it's special. Okay, so these two cities form such an interface to make sure from 1978 that China got a chance to open up to the world. That not only need Hong Kong but Shenzhen as well, because the two systems at that time was just too different to work together through as a gateway. On the other hand, the second point I want to echo to your point is about the special and the zones. We know that China has been doing that. Every city is trying to have this zone, that zone, this special. As I mentioned, even Shanghai and Shenzhen, they try to differentiate it from the other part of Shenzhen. And the Shenzhen has a Shenzhen special economic zone and the rest. So there's a lot of this kind of effort to make itself unique in an institutional way. However, there must be a limit. There must be something that eventually everyone find out my zone the same as the other zone. From market-oriented, how the enterprises will choose their place to go into, to invest, and stay in that particular zone. No, not that. So I somehow got a model from Shanghai or nearby cities. There's 9 cities which form some kind of a cross-city model, which allow 9 cities have the same formula in terms of how you register your firm. You can register in this city, but you got the same tax rebate or exemption from other city, the same formula. And then because you got the same formula, but on the other hand, every city has their own characteristics, like better transport, a better whatever, talent, etc. And then you choose which part of your enterprise supposed to be in this city or in other city. In this way, you open up the so-called special zone into a cross-border kind of environment. In that sense, the original or old way of zoning is dismissing. It's kind of a less important. More important, we make something similar, but then the enterprises or market will choose which one. I think in future, if we can do that in that way to integrate, and then those parts that need come to Hong Kong, they will come. On the other hand, if it's not suitable for Hong Kong, they go cross the border to the other side. Or some firms may do that. They have 2 registered firms cross the border, one on this side, the other on the other side, so that they can benefit both from the both sides.
Professor Anthony Cheung, I saw you taking quite a lot of notes when the other speakers were talking, and I would like to give you the opportunity to raise some of the questions that I'm sure that you had from listening to the others.
Yeah. First of all, Shenzhen, Hong Kong. I think it's good to bring up Shenzhen. In fact, I think nowadays, of course, many people in Hong Kong think that Shenzhen is doing so well, and then there are even views that we should learn from Shenzhen more. But just 2 decades ago, I think exactly in 2003, Shenzhen, in my view, was in an identity crisis. At that time, they were debating, does Shenzhen still have a role? Because you have the rise of Shanghai, the Yangtze River Delta region, and then some corporations, talent, they all moved northwards to Shanghai. And then there was this question in Shenzhen, is Shenzhen being left behind? Because Hong Kong at that time did not really bother too much about working together with Shenzhen. Later on, of course, Shenzhen has found a way and has become the Silicon Valley of China. But so, in a way, the Hong Kong-Shenzhen relationship, in my view, can provide a perspective to re-examine Hong Kong and Hong Kong's future. I remember in the early days when Shenzhen was founded or designated as a special economic zone, at that time the dominant thinking was to reproduce a Hong Kong in Shenzhen. And even when Qianhai was first mooted, the idea was to create a Zhongwan in Qianhai, a Zhongwan along the Hong Kong model. But now, of course, because of what happened in the last few years, somehow you have this reverse view that we try to reproduce Shenzhen in Hong Kong because somehow Shenzhen seems to be doing quite well. I think we need to avoid these two extremist views. I think we need to really consider, as what Brian put it, the organic dimension of integration or collaboration. Now, for a long time in Hong Kong, we have been thinking of Hong Kong's expansion, Hong Kong's growth on Hong Kong terms. We have been less regional, even though Hong Kong has always been regional historically. We have a very extensive 體外經濟, an external economy, extended towards Southeast Asia, even East Africa, and that is Hong Kong. But now, in recent decades, we have been more introvert. We have been more sort of defining ourselves within Hong Kong's border. I think while we are thinking about the telling the Hong Kong story, perhaps we should consider whether we should still be telling the Hong Kong story on the old terms, in the old paradigm. Because when we say that we need to be the super connector, are we really a super connector? What are we connecting? I mean, we have two rival camps in the world. And as far as China and the rest of the world is concerned, what are we connecting? As what Brian put it earlier, Shanghai is trying to be connected, Shenzhen too, and Guangzhou and all the other cities, Chongqing and all the cities. So what's special about Hong Kong? What kind of connectivity can Hong Kong provide? So we need to tell the Hong Kong story in the new way. And the new way is we try not to be overburdened by legacy, because I find that sometimes we tell a story because we always remember how great Hong Kong was in the past. So it's more shaped by legacy. But from now onwards, maybe we should be more outward-looking, future-looking. And then we say, what kind of destiny we want Hong Kong to get to? And then we tell the story that way. And in that direction, I think Shenzhen perhaps will be important and increasingly important. Some people in Shenzhen whom I've talked to, they recognize the limitation of Shenzhen. I'm sure, James, you will allude to that. And particularly in the past. And they always looked at how they could engage Hong Kong so that Shenzhen would get new impetus for growth, new ingredients. So for Hong Kong, I think we should also look at the relationship with Shenzhen and other parts of the GBA in that dimension. But unfortunately, because of 2019, I think a lot of our view about Hong Kong's current situation, Hong Kong's growth, has been shaped by 2019. We're so reluctant, we're so worried that Hong Kong will be lost if we sort of open up our boundary. And we increasingly think of Hong Kong as being absorbed. I think maybe we should get out of that very protectionist perspective because, I mean, whether we are absorbed or whether we actually will be immersed so that we can find a greater space depends on our strategy, our vision, our perspective. In the last few years in Hong Kong, we are talking about reindustrialization. Okay, so but this is a very vague term. what do you mean by reindustrialization? We're only 1% in manufacturing. So can we really rebuild a manufacturing in a new industrial base with 1%? So certainly we are not talking about that kind of industrialization. So recently there's interpretation of reindustrialization as innovation and technology. But still, Hong Kong alone, Hong Kong on its own cannot develop into an INT hub unless we collaborate with others, we partner with others in the GBA, in the region, the larger region, not just GBA, maybe in Asia and so on and so forth. So I think we need to take a broader view, and that broader view requires Hong Kong to be more daring. And I totally agree with Dui Dialogue. We need to move one step forward. It's not just Hong Kong waiting for advice, for instruction. On the other hand, if we see a future, we should actually promote that possibility, that future possibilities to central government, to other partners. I think it's time that Hong Kong be more confident of ourselves. If we believe in our legacy, then we should have more faith in ourselves that we should perhaps be able to find a way forward.
Brian, maybe I can pose the next question to you. It's from a participant online. You're online as well. And I would like to sort of generalize this question to ask that with the current environment and the current climate, there is some concern among people about how to express their views without continuously looking over their shoulders, without being questioned, without being suspected. And the questioner on Zoom asks, how can we establish our role as an intermediary between people-to-people links? Hong Kong has been very successful in playing this intermediate role, bringing people together. But now the questioner asks that we often look over our shoulder to see whether we are inadvertently crossing red lines. So maybe I can ask you your views on that question and your thoughts on that, please.
Thank you very much, Nabaha. That's an excellent question. And thank you to the audience member, Lee Kuan Yew, as well for that. You know, I'm a firm believer of Deng Xiaoping's adage, you know, that when we engage in reform, 我们要大胆点, you know, 我们要大胆, we have to be audacious in our pursuit of reform and opening up. And that's to say that, you know, in lieu of looking over our shoulders, the best solution to the problem of second guessing and overlooking our shoulders is to not do that, is to demonstrate through action that we can and indeed should undertake people-to-people exchanges, what some would term track to diplomacy, provided that it complies with the overarching prerogatives of the law and the parameters that have been set out under the two legislative proposals that have been passed over the past 4 years. And that's to say, I do not think Hong Kongers should be deterred or hesitant merely because of the different institutions we now live under. If you read or reread, you know, the content of these laws carefully, we'll realize that what they expressly prohibit are actions designed to undermine and also sabotage the interests of the country, which, as with any other country on earth, ought to be criminalized. The question then is, you know, why then are we so afraid? And I would say we do not and should not, you know, imagine or concoct excuses for us to basically succumb to this sort of almost inevitable conclusion that Hong Kong is now no longer a sort of open port for international exchanges. That is a misleading thought. That is a wrong thought. And we must do away with such excess caution and also risk aversion. With that said, just very quickly, a couple of points on how we can actually pursue people-to-people diplomacy. And the first is, it's imperative in my view that we tell China's story using the international community's language, as opposed to telling Hong Kong's story using mainland language. Why do I say that? It's because, you know, as highlighted very aptly by the current convener of IXCO, Regina Ip, you know, she's noticed, right, that over the past couple of years, there's been a growing trend of some Hong Kong politicians opting to engage in bellicose rhetoric, arguably more bellicose than the counterparts in the mainland, when they castigate or attack and criticize foreign instigators or foreign enemies of Hong Kong, so to speak. And the language used there is undiplomatic to the point where it actually turns off and drives away potential folks who could be interested or could be, you know, tempted to see Hong Kong through a more nuanced and balanced lens. So in lieu of using, you know, these deeply ideological and almost, frankly, I would say uncouth language in the way we interact with foreigners, I'd say we should stick to what Hong Kong has always done best, which is that, you know, when we see a human, we speak in human tongue. When we see a ghost, we speak in ghost tongue. And in Cantonese, we call this 見人講人話,見鬼講鬼話. It's true, right? We've got to adapt to the audience, adapt to the idiosyncrasies, and tell an authentic and balanced story without succumbing to the temptation to propagandize and proselytize. So that's the first point there. Secondly, invite more folks who might be skeptical of China to come to Hong Kong. Now, they might not be able to travel to the mainland for all sorts of reasons, visa restrictions, concerns of their own safety, which are unjustified and excessively, you know, a result of excessive paranoia, so on and so forth. But Hong Kong remains by far the best place for these voices who are not unduly critical and unabashedly antagonistic towards China, and yet are skeptical, for them to come and see for themselves what modern China is like through Hong Kong as a conduit. We should host more conferences engaging with uncomfortable topics ranging from, you know, China's current economic malaise through to institutional defects, through to room for possible political reform in Hong Kong, and also institutional and rule of law reform in the mainland. All of these are topics on which sensible academic and reasonable discussions can take place here in Hong Kong. And I don't see any reason why we should stop doing that. So that's a second point that I want to highlight here. And thirdly, capacity building is absolutely key. You know, my fear here is our education system is not producing individuals who are equipped for the 21st century. You know, Arabic or indeed Bahasa aren't widely taught or known, even offered as optional courses in the DSE curriculum, despite the significance of both the Gulf and also Indonesia and Malaysia by extension as well. So we're not training our youth to be equipped for a global era of multipolarity, and that is something I'm genuinely concerned about. So if there are folks listening in from the Education Bureau or any bureau, I really hope that we can undertake a serious systemic review of the secondary school education and also coordinate with UGC and universities to ensure that Hong Kong is increasingly equipped and can step up to its role as Asia's world city in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Maybe I can ask Dialogue for his thoughts as well about this question that was posed on Zoom about red lines and baselines and the fear of crossing these red lines. But yet, as you mentioned, Dialogue, policymakers and people in Hong Kong need to be more daring. They need to be more courageous, bolder in their perspective. How to balance that sort of courage and daringness with this seeming concern for inadvertently crossing certain red lines? Dialogue.
I tend to think that, you know, there's a tricky part in that of discussion, in the sense that it's very easy for us, you know, Hong Kong people to think that, you know, okay, just go back to the old ways and the old Hong Kong way of doing things, and then everything would be all right, because in the old days we don't pay much attention to red lines, and then we dare to be not that politically correct, and that's why we have comedy movies laughing at you know, politics in the mainland, all kinds of things. But we know, you know, we are no longer living in one country, two system 1.0. We are now in 2.0, and so the context is different now. But the point I want to raise is saying that, you know, don't try to just talk to ourselves and believing that, you know, by waiving all these worries, then do what you capable and willing to do, then everything is all right. I would say that we need to recognize about, you know, the worries that people have. And this is exactly why I like Brian's term of organic tensions, is that within Hong Kong's own culture and way of doing things, that we do have certain organic elements that, you know, we do the ways that pretty much like a market society. When the market responds, we respond. We do behave in a way that we believe in, you know, a very liberal and open environment. And then we are not afraid of, you know, talking to people of different countries and so on. We're supposed not to have too many restricted zones in the way that we approach culture or even politics. But at the same time, we need to recognize the tension. How to resolve it? I tend to think that, you know, for the SAR government itself, it has to give up certain kind of administrator mentality. Because as I said earlier, that if what they have in mind is no more than just to align and to follow, then you won't be able to cope with that sort of tension. Anything that you worried and anything that you think that people would charge you accountable, and that's why you probably get into trouble, and so you guys better not to do anything and don't touch anything. This is not the way to move ahead. Increasingly, we find people saying that probably you find the kind of flexibilities that you have in Macau is far more than in Hong Kong. That kind of thing that as someone growing up in Hong Kong, I don't quite like it that way. And so we need to go beyond just alignment and to follow. We need to have in mind that, we dare to be different and at the same time to go one step, two steps ahead. We need to be accountable. We need to make sure that, it won't undermine national security, but at the same time, there are still a lot of things that we can talk about, try to do it, and so on and so forth. But also there's a tricky part of it is that I'm sure that if you try to convince all these top administrators not to be too much of an administrator, you need to have message from Beijing, more than just what we have already heard of and the quotations made by Tsang already, that Hong Kong, of course, need to be international. Hong Kong need to be cosmopolitan. Hong Kong needs to maintain its specialness. We need probably something more than that to assure that Hong Kong needs to dare to be different. We need to have that kind of message, that kind of reassurance. It sounds very paradoxical, saying that we are going to be able to dare to touch on sensitive issues by asking Beijing to tell us you can be sensitive. It sounds very paradoxical, but at the same time, I tend to think that, put it in real context, you need that kind of message in order to push our administrators to become more daring, to be able to at least to take one step out of the very much of safety zone.
Just following on from that question, one thought that rose to my mind is perception. Clearly the questioner has this perception. People in Hong Kong indeed do now think of what are the red lines where they didn't have to think before. The title of today's dialogue is One Country, Two Systems. Can Hong Kong continue to be special and how? Sorry, One Country, Two Systems 2.0. For right reasons or wrong reasons, and for those of us who have been abroad, one country, two systems, in the eyes of many abroad, maybe we are being maligned. One country, two systems is dead. For many people abroad, they feel that Hong Kong is no different now from Shenzhen, from any other mainland Chinese city. And this kind of impression, wrong impression, seems to be seeping into Hong Kong's media and Hong Kong's people's mindsets, making Hong Kong people fearful and more paralyzed, more unwilling to dare, more unwilling to speak out. So it's like a downward spiral. So my question, open question to all our panelists, is that how do we overcome these kinds of sexy but wrong perceptions that one country, two systems is dead? It sounds very good, right, in a headline on international media or local media, or even a hint of it, that one country, two systems doesn't exist. Hong Kong is the same as any other mainland Chinese city. How can we in Hong Kong or Shenzhen or mainland China counteract this narrative? Because it does spill over locally, it does influence people's minds. And then once it does so, it's a negative spiral going downwards and downwards and downwards. Open question to anyone who would like to try and answer that, please. Yeah, we have someone in the live audience who would like to try to answer that, please.
Thank you very much, Professor. I'm pleased you let me to have an opportunity to speak to in this forum. Yeah. First of all, I need to declare my interest. I'm a die-hard supporter of Professor Cheung. When we both, in the good old days, working for one of the law enforcement agencies. Since then, I am an admirer of his knowledge and his courage to speak the truth. So whatever I'm so busy, I will attend every seminar held by Professor Cheung. And I need to identify myself. Ricky Hui. I am the founder of a non-profit making organization, which is international, telling the world how good is Hong Kong. And I found this foundation for 6 months, and lucky to say it's quite successful now. So to answer your question, Professor, Hong Kong still have one country, two systems. And the problem making Hong Kong fall from paradise to a place, the international media said that the unhappy country. The main reason has been identified by Professor Cheung within his 8 minutes speech. The reason why it fall from such a dimension to Hong Kong, the current situation, only one sentence. He said, we need to gain the trust of mainland China. This is the main reason why Hong Kong become here. I understand all the Hong Kong government try to build up their trust in the eyes of mainland China. But I want Professor Cheung to name one of the policy or one of the action or one of the result done by the Hong Kong people which gain the support of Hong Kong people and get the trust of mainland China. So, Professor, can you name one of the successful action? I don't think you can answer my question, because everybody knows there's none. So from day one, I can tell you, because of my past experience, I worked from the UK, I worked for the UK, and then I worked for the mainland China over 33 years. I know what the mainland China had thought about Hong Kong. They really want Hong Kong to have a free hand to develop the uniqueness of Hong Kong. Unfortunately, this is not my will. This is an international will that none of the policy, none of the action done by Hong Kong government gain the peace of mainland China. I don't want to name them. Otherwise, it will last until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So many. So, in actual fact, Hong Kong still have its uniqueness. But the uniqueness had gradually died down. I got a friend who is a well-known international entrepreneur. He always come to Hong Kong. And I asked him, why you can get a flight from your country to mainland China? Because his main base is in mainland China. He said, Hong Kong is such a fascinating place. And then this is the joke he told me. He said, one night in a hotel in Causeway Bay, he got a girlfriend. And he want to make love with a girlfriend, but forget to buy the condom. Then his pajama and a slipper go down and go to a nearby 7-Eleven to buy what he need. When he passed through a 110 noodle shop. He go in and eat a noodle shop and a bowl of noodle. And then nearby got a dessert. He got a Chinese dessert. Then went up to his room and do whatever he intended to do. So he said, there's no way in the world like Hong Kong. Hong Kong's activity round the clock. So that is one of the uniqueness. But I don't think the uniqueness is there. So to tell you the solution, I think there need two people to dance tango. The partner is Hong Kong and the mainland China. We need to invite mainland China to dance with Hong Kong tango. If we achieve this, we can see the end of the tunnel. That's the end of my speech.
Thank you. Professor Cheung, any comments from you about how we can change perceptions?
Well, I certainly agree that Hong Kong is still a very fascinating city. But let me also share a short story. Some years ago, almost 10 years ago, so I was visiting a university in Tokyo, and one of the young teachers there was always escorting me. So I asked him, "Have you been to Hong Kong?" And this young man teacher. He said, "Yes, every week, almost every week." So I said, "Why? I mean, why is Hong Kong so attractive to you?" And he said, every week he makes sure he comes to Hong Kong, he will go to Mongkok. And I said, well, in Tokyo, I mean, I find Tokyo very fascinating, a lot of things happening, and he told me that lots of things are happening in Hong Kong, which sometimes we in Hong Kong may not notice. So I still believe that Hong Kong has its fascinating side. But of course, certainly skepticism, doubts, self-doubts have increased. So there, take it to the next level in answering one of the questions posed on the screen. What exactly will Hong Kong become in the near future? I think to start that journey of responding, addressing that question, first of all, we need to have humility. And I think after the last few years, I think we are made more humble. But humility should not lead to loss of hope. We have less baggage. I think we should have less baggage, intellectual depth in terms of understanding things, in terms of trying to do more, trying to do better. And we need boldness. We need daringness, not be constrained. Now, the official rhetoric, and certainly I agree with that direction, is that we should be back to our superconnector role. But the term superconnector could be very superficial. If you want to be a bridge, first of all, you have to make sure that both ends of the bridge would like to reach out to the other side. Otherwise, the bridge is of no use. Now, at the moment, of course, I mean, if we talk about East-West, China and the US, China and the US-led Western camp are not on good terms. Hostility, suspicions, conflict, yes. But looking at it in the medium and long term, I don't believe China will fall, as what some Western observers are speculating or would like to see. On the other hand, I don't believe that we are now coming to a stage where the West will fall and then the East will rise continuously. It's not as simple as that. So it's a world of coexistence. It's a more multipolar world. Now, ultimately, I think this tension between the US and China will continue, but coexistence will become increasingly the essence of the new normal. So I have a lot of faith in the future of China. But that does not necessarily mean that Hong Kong will still have a role to play. So this superconnector role has to be nurtured. We should not take it for granted. We should not say, well, in the past, we were the superconnector, so we will continue to be a superconnector. So we have to cultivate. We have to cultivate this superconnector role. Maybe the term is not a good term now, but we need to put the strategic link. And we have to nurture it. We have to nurture it like what we do with gardening, with care, with sunlight. I mean, we need to make sure that such a link will serve a function. Lei Dialogue said earlier that sometimes government officials, they still tend to speak in this administrative way. The bureaucrats speak, or sometimes, and I think we have to go all of the way to impress people that we are still very open-minded. Yes, there are red lines, but that doesn't mean we sort of self-constrain ourselves. And that brings me to what Deng Xiaoping said when he talked about what is meant by a patriot in the 1980s, in order to impress people in Hong Kong that most people are patriots. And he said, even if you believe in feudalism, you can be a patriot. Now that is going out all of your way to impress people. Now if even those who believe in feudalism, in slavery could be patriot. Everyone could be patriot. So let's focus. Let's come together to sort of to work towards reunification, one country, two systems. And during the early days of the talk about Hong Kong's future, this phrase about Ma jiu pao, mo jiu tiao. Horse racing will continue. You can still go on dancing. Now, this is not just any term about the how important, how flexible Beijing would be. Because remember, that was the early 1980s. And at that time, the mainland had very negative view about Hong Kong, capitalism. Because capitalism in Hong Kong was considered to be very decadent. Horse racing, dancing, and these are all sort of decadent way of living. But then the message then was, even if you continue to be racing horses, you continue to have dancing, fine. This is one country, two system. You keep your style, lifestyle. So I think we need to be more innovative in terms of impressing on the population that let's come together and work for this one country, two system 2.0. Let's make Hong Kong shine again. I think we still have a lot of potential.
Brian, you had your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to echo what Anthony said and respond to Tanish here with a couple of thoughts. Firstly, I do think that Hong Kong has a role to play in connecting, but it's not just between East and West. And that's largely because the West, for the better or worse, is, firstly, it's a heterogeneous entity. So it's not the case that all parts of the West are open to connecting. I still think we have to double down on efforts to court Europe, to engage Australia and Oceania. But I will say I have lingering doubts over Hong Kong's ability to proactively engage America, despite the ubiquity and number of American businesses in Hong Kong. But beyond that, the key point here is that Hong Kong needs to engage and connect with the rest of the world as well. And that includes not just the global south, but also countries in Northeast Asia, countries in the Gulf, in the Middle East, whom you may argue is not necessarily a part of the global south. We need to look beyond just the Western partners as a framework here and ask two questions. One, what exactly is it that China can't do, or the rest of China can't do, and the mainland can't do, that we can do for the mainland in relation to these countries? And secondly, independently of China, what can we value add and contribute towards these economies in which people, we've got 80% of the world's population living in, the rest, right? And whilst it was okay for us to ignore the rest historically, because it was always fine, for us to just bathe in the glory of being the sort of love child of Sino-American friendship, I mean, the reality is we now live in an era where that's no longer the case. So what's our offering to these countries? That, to me, is a key direction to contemplate and reflect upon. Secondly, can Hong Kong serve as a value-adding conduit, or rather value-adding stop and source of inspiration for the mainland? I mentioned the need for political experimentation here. A friend of mine, or actually many friends of mine, have said to me that universal suffrage, now that we've passed Article 23, we've passed the national security law, it's high time that we completed the obligations that were stipulated explicitly in Article 45 of the Hong Kong Basic Law. So can universal suffrage in a new era, under and given all these reasonable constraints, be a way for differentiating between Hong Kong and the mainland? I'm sure there's openness and receptiveness towards that, but the key is, can this and how can this benefit the mainland without disrupting Hong Kong's domestic political stability and also order as well? So that's another direction I think Hong Kong should certainly contemplate, more governance-centered and public policy-making oriented reforms that have informational value for the rest of the mainland, especially in the GBA, going back to the point then about how raised just then about Shenzhen, and also the special economic zones and what that looks like in the interplay between Shenzhen and Hong Kong. And finally, arts and culture, advanced manufacturing and designing and R&D for that, but also, on industries that are fledgling and developing in the GBA, for instance, geriatric technology, catering to the elderly population that not only Hong Kong has, but the rest of our country is also increasingly grappling with, right? Thanks to our wonderful, long average lifespan, but also the gigantic, population that we have here in China and the other factors that contribute towards an aging population. The demand and also appetite for geriatric tech, healthcare tech, is only going to grow. And I don't see any key leading rivals or counterparts in the mainland right now
that would render Hong Kong's role, redundant. If anything, I think Hong Kong has a huge role to play, really, in contributing towards geriatric healthcare and medical technology within China and also in Asia at large. So there's still a lot that we can do here in Hong Kong. And I'm not at all pessimistic. I just think that the key prerequisite is we've got to be, realistic, we've got to be pragmatic, and also understand that the world has changed and that the world has moved on, and that Hong Kong's reputation requires active defending as opposed to sloganistic and slogan-driven parroting of official phrases that would do little other than speak to the die-hard zealots who are already converted to the status quo and beyond. And that, to me, is absolutely key.
Thank you, Brian. As we're coming towards the end of our scheduled time, I'd just like to ask our panelists if they have any concluding remarks, final thoughts that they would like to present. Tylok, James, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think most of the talks are trying to say Hong Kong has a bright future, and I'm also very positive to that. At the same time, I think another way to be positive is to still recognize Hong Kong is just a city, okay? And we are not only a city, we are super aging city. In that sense, we are not so aggressive as Shenzhen, for example. Their average is only 31. We are 46. Okay, but on the other hand, recently I saw a lot of short videos made by mainlanders, and I realized the young generation from mainland, they have a very different view from us when seeing Hong Kong. What Hong Kong being attractive, not conventionally. They have a very different views, and then realize the treasure, the best part of Hong Kong, which probably when you live here like a decade, you forgot it, or you don't have that freshness. And I think this may address or marketing Hong Kong to even not only the world, but the rest of China. It's also important. The other thing I think I want to also anchor very much dialogue and Professor Cheung about daring. I am definitely hope that our administrators can be more daring. But on the other hand, we have to realize that the whole world is politicized, so that anything that we cannot be a third-party space as Singapore, because we are part of China. So when you have to take a side, you have to take a side, not like Singapore in somewhere in the middle. But on the other hand, is there any way that we can, maintain as large as possible that third-party space? How to do that is very challenging. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Tylok, any concluding thoughts from you before we wrap up?
Well, just a very short note by saying that I think it would be quite an interesting mental exercise to just go back to the basic law and also to dig up all those discourses on one country, two systems in the 80s and probably in the 90s as well, and try to fill in the blanks. I mean, in the old days, we thought that, it would be just enough to say that, mainland would be state enterprise, Hong Kong would be market, they are socialism, and then we're capitalism, and so on. And then we stay with these big words for 40 years. I tend to think that we need to sit back and look. The market system in Hong Kong is not just about market, but at the same time, it's about simplicity. It's easy for you to register a limited company in Hong Kong, and then you proceed to do business. We have laws that allow us to have very simple procedures and so on. Our taxation system as well. We really need to go down all the list, which is a tall one, I believe, about our advantages and what are the nice things about it, how we actually run things in a simple but at the same time a robust way, so that we will be able to, like what's been said, allow us to cope with organic tensions, allow us to differentiate. We need to fill in the blanks. We have been absent from that exercise for 40 years. It's about time for us to go back. Sounds a bit cliche, but I think we need to do it.
Here. Thank you so much. Professor Anthony Cheung, last word to you before I
Okay, very briefly. I agree that Hong Kong cannot go back to the old days. The world has changed, the nation has changed. So we used to be the by default third-party space. Now we have to redefine what do you mean by being third-party. I think the world is something that is beyond Hong Kong's control. However, internally, I think there's still a lot of things that we can do. Now, the current situation is partly shaped by what happened since 2019. And now that we have already got Article 23 legislation, we have got the national security law, I think the population by and large recognize the importance of national security. The official sort of red lines are well established. With all that in place, I think it's now important that we try our best to get out of the overcast of 2019. I think that's important, because unless we try to come out of 2019, can we then start a new page? Can we then have a fresh look at where we are, what we are capable of doing, what should be done? I think, so I would urge that whether for government, for stakeholders, for business, for young people, try to get out of the overcast. Of course, there are lessons to be learned from 2019 as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheung. So we are past the scheduled end time. I think this has been a very enlightening session where we have all agreed that we need to reflect, reset, and reboot one country, two systems. It's 27 years after this method was implemented. And I think we have come up with some excellent ideas of ways to do that and directions to pursue. I would just like to take a few seconds to now wrap up this whole policy dialogue series. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, this is the 6th season in which we have been holding these policy dialogues. They have been extremely successful. Today's policy dialogue is the 6th one of this 6th season, and we've had a very robust discussion with a star-studded lineup, as we have had for the earlier policy dialogues. We had 200 registrants today, which is almost a record, 200 online registrants. We have about 20 in-person attendees today. We had a very exciting build-up because a couple of our speakers had to travel at the last minute, and unfortunately, Tsang Yok-sing is ill with an eye issue in hospital, so we wish him a speedy recovery. I'd like to also thank our 3 sponsoring agencies for these policy dialogue series, not just for this season's 5 dialogues, but also the last 6 seasons, because there's a tremendous amount of organizational effort that goes into making these policy dialogues possible. They include the Division of Public Policy at HKUST, the Department of Social Science and Policy Studies at Education University of Hong Kong, and the Academy of Hong Kong Studies, also at the Education University of Hong Kong. Without their support, this policy dialogue series would not be possible. We shall, at the end of this season, reconvene and re-examine the policy dialogue series going forward. But irrespective of our decision going forward, I would like to take a moment to thank Professor Anthony Cheung and Professor Lloyd Tylock for their central involvement in the last 6 seasons of policy dialogues. And we hope that you have found it interesting, stimulating, thought-provoking. And as you can see from this policy dialogue, we have dared to ask questions on issues that perhaps today few people would hold a dialogue on one country, two systems 2.0. And our actions in these policy dialogues, that it is possible to have intellectually meaningful, constructive dialogue between interested individuals on key issues pertaining to the future of Hong Kong. I think we can all agree that we are all super passionate about Hong Kong's future, and we would like the best for Hong Kong and for the motherland as well. And it is in that context that we dare to ask these questions in a constructive and a forward-looking manner. So with those remarks, I would like to bring this today's policy dialogue to a close. I would like to thank our speakers online, Tylock and Brian. I would like to wish once again speedy recovery to Jasper, and also thank our in-person speakers, Professor Anthony Cheung and Dr. James Wang. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you for your patience, and we hope to see you soon in the future. Goodbye and good day.
Bye.